Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you with us. I'm John Peterson from the Arlington Institute, and we're carrying forth here from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town, and about 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore, where the Arlington Institute holds forth. We're happy to have you with us. We come to you every 2 weeks to have a deep dive exploration into some of the most fundamental kind of issues related to the huge kind of change that's going on the planet these days. And I'm joined by my friends to make a quartet out of us. Greg Braden, hello, my friend. How are you?
I am well, John and Penny and Kingsley. I'm coming to you from our little studio outside of Santa Fe. Spring is arrived. Thank you for sending it our way.
And Kingsley Dennis is from the UK. Hi, Kingsley.
Hello, John and Greg and Penny, and thank you for being here and stealing our springtime because it's freezing where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and from the freezing Northwest, we have Penny Kelly from Michigan. How are you?
I'm good, except I'm in Arkansas this week and I won't be home for a while yet. So,
Well, we're happy to have you from wherever you come from. And
yeah, where it's 86 degrees.
Oh, 86. My.
Wow.
That's serious summer. Yeah.
Yeah, for a day.
So thank you all, and thank those of you who are listeners and viewers for being with us today. We're going to talk about an interesting kind of subject that says, ask the big question that says, can human nature ever be changed? Very interesting kind of issues around that these days that you couldn't have discussed much, 10 years ago. And that has to do with the big kind of lingering questions all my life. I've heard these comments saying, well, you can't change human nature. And that human nature is what it is, and it's going to be the same forever. It's just this common thread that essentially says that who we are is baked in the cake, and there's no way in the world that it's all going to change, and so kind of get used to it or deal with it in one way or another. That's a problem. That's a conceptual and intellectual problem, because if we're looking out over a relatively short period of time at a new era, an era of magnitude and significance unlike any that's ever been anybody's experienced on this planet before, certainly in recorded history. If you're looking into a new era and that's commonly described as 1,000 years of peace, then that by definition means that it is dramatically different than the past, and the past is the human nature that has produced all of the wars and the conflicts and the legal trials and the on and ongoing kind of issues and divorces and whatever that are all seem to be kind of endemic to human behavior and human activities. But here we are for the first time. I mean, this is one of a couple of these kinds of, for the first time in all history kind of deals. For the first time, you're looking into the possibility that everything is going to fundamentally change. In that possibility is the necessarily some kind of shift into who we are and how we look at each other and we understand each other and the larger reality and what our priorities and values are and so on. And so my question today is, can human nature change? And if it does change, how might it change? What might make this happen?
Yeah, John, this is when I received the question. It was on Monday. We got the question in the email. It was deceptively simple, and the more I thought about it, the more. I mean, we could have two quartets, about this. So I'm going to start with a quote from the movie Contact. It's one of the most famous quotes from Carl Sagan when Jodie Foster is transported to another world, and she meets people from another world. And they are speaking with her, and what they say is, you're an interesting species. You're capable of such beautiful dreams and such horrible nightmares. You feel so lost, cut off, and alone, only you're not. In all our searching, the only thing we found that makes the emptiness bearable is each other. My personal view, and having read the psychology behind this, we like to believe that we are essentially good beings and peaceful beings. The reality is that we're wired for all possibilities. What psychologists tell us is that it depends upon the environment that we find ourselves in that will elicit the response that we're capable of. So there are 3 conditions that psychologists have identified that will invite us to betray our good nature and to lash out in the world. And those 3 conditions, the first condition is when we feel personally threatened, we will lash out to defend ourselves. The second condition is when we feel that our families are threatened. And the third is when we feel that our way of life is threatened. Any one or combination of those 3 conditions are enough to elicit what we call our darkest angels. And I think this is what sets us apart, John, from all other forms of life, is that we are capable of all of these, yet we also are capable of choosing how we respond. This is our humanness. So if 1,000 years of peace, what these studies suggest is if we are to achieve those 1,000 years of peace, the way we do that is that we meet all 3 of those conditions where every individual feels safe, where their families feel safe, and where their way of life is secure and safe, and that leads to those 1,000 years of peace. That is the way we're wired. That's our inner nature.
That question, when I heard it, I was reminded of, I think everyone's familiar with the story of the frog and the scorpion. I'll just briefly mention it. There was a flood in a river, and the scorpion needed to get across the water to survive, and there was a frog there. So the scorpion called the frog over and said, can you take me over? I'll jump on your back, and the frog can swim across, and I'll get over the waters, the rising waters. And the frog says, but you're a scorpion. And the scorpion says, yes, so, I need to survive like everybody. And the frog says, but won't you sting me? And the scorpion says, well, think about it. If I sting you when I'm on your back and you drown, I drown, we both die. I don't want to die. The frog says, yeah, sounds reasonable. Okay, get on my back. 3/4 away over the water, the stream, of course, the scorpion stings the frog. And as the frog is dying, he says, but I thought you wouldn't sting me. And the scorpion says, yeah, but I'm a scorpion. I sting people. That's my nature. You see, what the story points to is that there is an inherent nature, but that's a kind of lower nature, I would say. There are certain ingrained lower nature in certain species. And when we hear the story like, a leopard never changes its spots, a person can't change. It's a bit of a cliche as well. But often I think people tend to mix in the personality into that. Because from our personality-wise, people on a whole don't like to change because they have their routine and their patterns, and they have their stability. So because we live in a kind of short-term kind of forecasting environment, we tend to want to see it as stable. And actually, to be honest, for most people's lives, if there aren't major events, it's quite stable from birth to death. So I think that idea that we don't like change comes from that. But in fact, can human nature change? I would say in a way, it's always been changing. And a part of that is because, as Greg mentioned, it's our environmental conditions. And also, I think because part of that nature is the higher nature, not only the lower nature, it's the higher nature. And that comes from our psychical capacities. We may call it, the capacity of reception of consciousness. Now, if we, our lives, we've only been in one lifetime, in our epoch. If we translate ourselves to, historical times, a different epoch, it was a much different environment because perspectives were changing. A similar thing in the history of painting, the history of how perspectives have changed in painting is actually very interesting. If you study art, which I'm not an expert on at all, you can see that the changing perspectives when artists first started to go to aerial positions and see perspectives of the land in a much more aerial view, and they changed their way of describing that. That helped to change people's consciousness. And I think actually it's that because our consciousness participates with the environment, which then feeds back in a positive feedback loop the environment, and that can change the way we consider things. So that's one aspect. So I think we also have to understand that the human body is an energetic body. And so it exists as part of an energetic environment. And that energetic environment has an influence on how it wires the body. Now, the human species actually is one of the few species whereby when a child is born, it is so dependent on the mother because its nervous system hasn't been completed. Many animals, they're born and their nervous system is more completed, their instincts are fully intact, and they can survive within a very short time. But the time when a human baby is born, the nervous system actually sends out sensors and is attuned to the energetic environment and completes itself in understanding of that energetic environment. So we have terraformed, or our planet has terraformed the electromagnetic environment extensively over the last decades. And of course, since especially since the second industrial revolution. So each generation actually is being hardwired to relate differently to an energetic environment. Therefore, we see different characteristics, different styles of nature in each generation. So in one sense, if our technological generation future is going to change, each generation is going to be hardwired slightly different, neuronal wired and energetically rewired to that environment. Another thing to take into account, which I think is very important, is the nature of shock. Now, we know if someone has an NDE, a near-death experience, or an OBE, out-of-body experience, they often come back to the same body, but a completely different nature. Because their spirit or their soul or their energetic being has had a shock. So when they come back to the vessel has a lower nature, which is very similar to human beings, because human beings biologically, externally, haven't changed much over aeons. But inside, of course, the vessel has been changing. So the shock nature, I think, is a big factor, which is why many traditional teachings, they put in a shock moment during the teaching to actually be able to push a student beyond the threshold, which they can't normally go.
I thought this was a really interesting question because when I was in college, just getting my bachelor's degree, I had to write a thesis because I was an independent student. And this was the question that I wrote my thesis on. So the answer for me, the short answer is yes. But why and how and when and where and what part of that human nature are you changing? Because there's physical human nature, there's mental, there's emotional, there's spiritual, etc. So if you define human nature as a combination of all of those things, then what you realize is that any one of those can become a doorway. Physical events can provide the impetus for change, mental, emotional, spiritual, etc. So I would start with saying that the first thing we have to realize if we want to change anything is that we are frequencies. And what was it you said? I loved what you said, Kingsley. We have terraformed the electromagnetic environment tremendously. in the last 100 years. We are an electromagnetic creature. As we transform the environment, we transform ourselves, and we inch up to higher states of consciousness. So frequency is what turns DNA on and off, and your nature is going to be whatever your DNA allows. So if you have, if nothing's turned on, no DNA, or just the base, we'll say the base formula is turned on and functioning, that kind of equates to, I like what Greg said, something about the dark angels. We align with our dark angels. If we have more parts of DNA or different combinations turned on, you can have some pretty advanced skills, and you will align with your better, what you call them, better angels or angels of light or something like that. So we need to pay attention to what are we turning on and what are we turning off. And I agree with Kingsley that war and shock, and Greg, I think, mentioned war as well. Those are big issues. Another thing that I would bring in is when you're born, the first 72 hours, you will become chemically and physically habituated. It takes 3 days, 72 hours. In that 72 hours, if you don't wash off that creamy white stuff that babies are born with, and you use that to massage the entire body of that little one, then by the time that 3 days is up, they are able to make full eye contact, smile, and begin to pull themselves up. They are walking before they are 6 months old, running at 6 months old. They are advanced physically. They are incredibly competent mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We don't do that. We shock our kids, our babies, terribly in many, many ways. And we habituate chemically to that immediately. And so that becomes the first response. Later, when you want to change your human nature and you want to raise your consciousness and expand and change your DNA that's active, you have to combat that chemical addiction of your habituation, because your first response is boom, it's going to be this. And you have to go through that and go beyond that to be able to hold the space in your own consciousness for your chemical state to change. Your frequencies determine your chemicals. Your chemicals determine your feeling state and consciousness. So the consciousness can work backwards and change that it's an interactive, both ways kind of process. But if you don't know that, you remain sort of a victim of your own body for the rest of your life. Another thing that changes human nature is Kundalini. Kundalini is a massive electromagnetic event in the body, and it changes you in every way. It changes your consciousness, your physical operation, your taste for foods, your response to others, your perspective, everything, your capacity to know what others are thinking, what they're feeling, what they're going to do next, and on and on and on. So multiple personality disorder, that right there shows us that we can change human nature. Boom, if you have somebody who's got MPD, multiple personality disorder, and you hypnotize them and you sample their DNA, you get one kind of DNA. If you then move them into another version of themselves and sample that DNA, that's another set of DNA in the same body. So we are much more flexible and much more malleable than we think.
We're talking not only about individuals, but we're talking about societies. If you're talking about 1,000 years of peace, it's everybody kind of coming up with the same idea and seeing the world in some variation of the same theme. And that is that's qualitatively something quite different than just one couple getting along okay. And so you say, how do you get into that space? Well, there are certainly multiple sources that are suggesting that there are waves of energy coming out of the center of the galaxy that are changing our DNA. A couple of you have talked about DNA, and that are enabling kind of aspects of our DNA that have been dormant, that would open up this broadening, this ability to kind of better deal with, or more in a more sophisticated way, deal with our reality and our interpersonal relationships. And so there's this kind of contextual kind of thing that might be coming downstream.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, very well said, Greg, and I agree. And this is a bifurcatory moment, but also it's an energetic bifurcation as well, which is, in a way, evolution has always operated by that way. And there's always a certain percentage of, let's say, the evolutionary pool who, let's say, can understand, and we can discuss it, and we get it, we perceive it, we conceive it. But also there's a large part of the evolutionary pool who are energetically resonating with that change, even though they may not be able to intellectually conceive of it. But it's still, the wave can take all parts. And so, I mean, the body, as you rightly say, transhumanism is really trying to attack the body and hijack the body, because the body is an energetic blueprint. Yeah. And when we move into a different energetic environment, that affects the whole energetics of the body, as we've discussed. But if you try to merge the body into machine, you cut that down. You stagnate that evolutionary shift. So if we imagine a kind of these bifurcations, what happens is that what tends to happen in the epoch coming in is of a different resonance, and it's already here. And so the bifurcation is that usually, again, it's through a shock. We can use the allegory of Darwinism, which of course is incorrect, but that when the fish moved onto the land, they didn't conceive of the land before they moved there, but the land, was an energetic environment waiting for them, and it energetically changed and morphed the species. So when we're moving into the energetic environment, there's something that's going to pull us back, and that's the lower nature, the demons that you mentioned, Greg. If we resonate or attract to the lower energetics, our demons, our worst nature, which is what the environment right now is trying to pull us down to. The fear, the warfare, the insecurity. Let's put our hope in transhumanism. Is trying to bring down the resonance. So when we have that bifurcation of resonance, some degree of people, some percentage will go down, stay there, and hopefully it's the ones we can do without. But of course, there's going to be so many people that even without knowing about it, our energetics have changed. All those people of good nature, we believe in the betterment of humanity. We don't have to be intellectual. We just have to have a good common sense, a good grounding. And the energetics will already be shifting, and you'll be aligning with that new resonance.
One more comment. We're trying to have a world of peace, 1,000 years of peace. That's, it's often referred to as the golden age, but that needs to be corrected. It's because the people become the golden race. They're the golden consciousnesses of the future. If we don't have everybody on board, can we sustain that all by ourselves?
Well, there's the common kind of principle that TM people and others have suggested that all it takes is a couple percentage of people with a new perspective. Yeah, high leverage can inordinately influence the environment much greater.
Yeah, Penny, I think another piece of this, and we haven't really touched on it, and we don't have a lot of time here, but when we talk about human nature, we tend to think that those are the natural tendencies that are kind of hardwired. So the way I think of it is at the factory, at the human factory, we come in with these presets of consciousness that are enough to get us going in life. And some people will stay with those presets and will never push those boundaries, and others through life will evolve from that. So all potentials are with us, and that is our nature. And I don't think we need to change that. What is taught, and this I think is the most dangerous thing that we've been taught, is binary thinking. It's the binary thinking that drives the wedge between people and families and societies, that something's either good or bad, or progressive or conservative, red and blue, Christian or Muslim, whatever it is. I think we're going to have to get through the binary thinking into another kind of thinking. And I'm seeing it happen now because even people in my community who have been so entrenched in one idea or one polarity or another are now seeing the absurdity of where those polarities are leading, and they're throwing their hands up, they're surrendering, and they're saying, maybe it's all possible. So I think the polarity thinking, we have learned that was taught to us, and it was intentional to divide us. And I think the healing of our polarity thinking will be one of the greatest stepping stones toward the kind of peace. And it is a choice. It is a choice to move beyond polarity that we all can make.
It's very much a choice.
Yeah.
Anybody that's ever been in the military and thought about what that was about knows that it's absolutely a choice, because what the whole process is, and for education and any number of things, but the military is a better example, is that the people that get in there are not, when you get recruited, you're not a killer in general. Very few people are really interested in killing other kinds of folks. And so there is a training and a process that, and if you've ever spent any time around U.S. Marines, you know that they do a brainwashing thing on you, and they move you into a space that you would never have naturally had. And they have systematized the whole process, and that's what and so the whole idea of being hardwired is kind of problematic. It's a function, as you had said, Greg, to the environment you've grown up into and the kind of the loving nature, Penny alluded to, the context that you're in, because there's a whole lot of people who are just really are not interested in fighting anybody and want to just get along. You might argue even that the majority by far of people are like that. But what the system has done is drive us into these other spaces. And that, of course, is another very lengthy conversation about why they do that and who's behind all of that.
Well, John, I have a question for you. What you're describing for individuals is what is happening to entire societies in the Middle East. In your experience, once an individual is conditioned into that space, is it possible for them to move back once they know and experience? You can't unknow and unexperience. Can they move into a space where that thinking is no longer part of their lives?
Could I bring in a wild card here? Revelation. For example, Paul's revelation on the road to Damascus. I don't think his change of heart, change of nature was a choice. He had a revelation. And right now we're coming to, as many people are talking about, the point of apocalypse. And apocalypsis in Greek means revelation. So it may be that there's some influences, some wild card that we can't pin down, whether it's energetics, terrestrial or non-terrestrial. Something could come in that actually we're not rationally able to make a choice through, but something comes through as revelatory, and we do make that unknown choice.
Yeah, that could be the waves of energy out of the galaxy and whatever could contribute to that.
Revelation could be coming in some form. I don't have to be a religious scripture form, but something, as you say, that we're not accustomed to, that can change wholly our higher nature.
Wow. I'm having all kinds of thoughts about moments in my life where I discovered I could kill. And those, you're right, John, those aren't my choices. But, you know, when somebody hurts your children, something shifts inside of you.
Every movie that Liam Neeson has done is all about that, where where he's a trained killer, he wants to leave, and then the company calls him back, and somebody takes his family, and the rest of it, you know, that's his whole career right now, just based on that.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Delightful, interesting, always provocative conversation, and I appreciate it. And for those of you who are our viewers, we really appreciate you being with us, and hope you'll come back again. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We come to you from the Arlington Institute here, located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town that's just 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore. And Transition Talks is only one, and is one of, and Quartet and What's Up, and all of these are different programs that we have, all that are all focused on facilitating this transition to this new world, trying to help this emergence of a new human. And so we invite you to learn more about that at arlingtoninstitute.org. And we'll certainly be back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about another interesting kind of topic that's central to this whole kind of giant change that we're all going through. And so we'll look forward to having you with us then. Thank you all, for all the members of our panel here today. And then for all of you who are our viewers, we really appreciate this. We can't do this without you. And so we hope that you'll come back and that you'll go check out our website and see what else we have to do. And so thank you all, and be well. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you all so much. Love you all.
Well,
Bye-bye.